Rolling.
Renegades.
Andre and I had this big idea.
Growing.
I had to have the people who didn't believe in me.
Between one day and the next, everything changed.
Nurses know how to solve shit.
Renegades.
Welcome to the RNegade Podcast, a revolutionary approach to continuing education for nurses who don't just do what they're told. We're shining a light on the innovators, the mavericks, the pioneers, the renegades who are blowing up the boxes that the rest of the world is still trying to think outside of. On today's podcast, we have Karen Martell of the Hormone Solution Podcast. Karen is she's like Mozart, an autodidactical geek, thank God. She is an expert in nutrition and especially female hormones and creating a revolution in the medical profession. So I'm so excited for nurses to increase their toolbox in this hormonal science and biochemistry of the body during the perimenopausal and menopausal phases of life that they can teach to their patients, or at the very least, give them a resource to go to. So please enjoy Karen Martell. Yeah, it's good to have somebody, an actual professional podcaster.
Well, somebody did that for me though once, like years ago. They're like, "You're not talking into your microphone properly." I'm like, "Oh, what?"
Yeah. The reason I'm excited about this personally is because I'm going through menopause. Like, just started. Like, it's like I used to be able to like time my watch by my periods. And it's like, oh, yep, ovulated, never did any kind of birth control or never did anything like that. And my father, let's start off the podcast talking about me, shall we?
Yeah.
My father, I was raised Catholic, and the first time I got my period, he took me to a priest who specialized. No.
What? Oh,
you would think, yeah, that would be most people's reaction.
Horrific. Yeah.
He took me to a priest who was also a doctor who specialized in women's health and the Billings ovulation method. And this guy, I guess I got lucky, but God love him, in a language that a 10-year-old could understand. He told me about women's cycles and had like things and gone, and at a very young age, I got to know my body very intimately and what those different feelings were. And he did it in not a creepy way. It was like very kind of,
that's amazing,
science and biology reduced into it. Like, this is what he did. Like, this was his thing. And I always could get pregnant when I wanted to. I knew when but all of a sudden, about 3 months ago, it just shut off like that. There was no like trickle. There was no irregularity. And then all of a sudden it turned on again. So personally, I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. But
yeah,
I would like to know, firstly, how did this become your wheelhouse?
Yeah. So I kind of have two stories, but they relate, but I'll shorten it down so we're not here all day talking about my story.
Well,
I appreciate hearing about yours though.
One of the questions I love to ask people, because usually people who are kind of, pioneers and like yourself, like any nurse listening to this is going to hear something that they're not used to hearing in conventional medicine, but the way you share it, that's so relatable to everybody, like just like that priest, forgive the comparison, but you put it like very complex biochemical information into a way that's relatable, that anybody could understand. But I'm excited for nurses to hear something outside of conventional medicine, that we usually do, and especially from you. So the question I like to ask, was there a moment that made everything different for you from one day to the next? And that's usually the reason why somebody like you does what they do and is so passionate about it.
Yes. And that's exactly what happened. I think my life, all the things that happened to me were all meant to be, because it led me here as a massive advocate now for women in midlife. And if I hadn't gone through what I did, I wouldn't be here. So from a young age, I had a lot of hormone dysfunction. I got it changed around. I figured it out for myself because nobody at that time was talking about hormonal dysfunction, especially in younger women. Like it happened to me when I was in my early 30s, where I just had all of these hormonal issues that nobody knew that it was from the hormones. And, I was put on an antidepressant from my doctor, a sleeping pill from my doctor, was told to just exercise more, eat less. And I did all of the things I was being told to do. And yet I was still gaining weight and having severe PMS and depression and bloating. And like the list goes on and on. And so I was like, this is hormonal. There's something going on with my hormones. And sure enough, there was. I had hypothyroidism. I had really high estrogen, no progesterone. My cortisol was tanked. So I had a whole, just like the perfect storm.
Mm.
So it took several years, figured it out, went on my own journey of, I'm going to figure this out because nobody else is going to. And a doctor's not going to be to a 33-year-old, oh, it's your hormones. You're going into some early perimenopause here.
Mm.
So got it figured out, was doing really well. At that point, I decided, you know what? I want to help other women that are having similar issues and that are suffering from weight loss resistance, where they're doing everything right and they still can't lose the weight. Because that was me. I was eating perfectly, exercising like a mad woman, and I was getting fatter and fatter. And it didn't matter. I dropped my calories sometimes to 500 calories a day. I know that's severe, but I had eating disorder. I was a mess. I was a hot mess. And I still wouldn't lose weight even at 500 calories. And so this whole calorie in, calorie out was such bull crap that I was like, there's got to be more women like me out there. And so I was on a mission to help those women. And I became certified as a nutritionist and started working with women in weight loss and their hormones and thinking I got this figured. I thought I was up and up on all things hormones and was like, okay, great. Menopause is going to be a breeze for Karen. Not so much.
Well, wait, can we rewind just a second?
Yes.
So how did you help yourself? So you figured
Back
all this
then.
stuff out, but what did you do for yourself in that period when you were 33?
I went and I did the exact opposite of what I was being told, because once I saw what my hormones were doing, so I ended up, because a really good friend of mine was a naturopath. So this is we're talking 15 years ago, 16 years ago. And I was like, okay, I think there's something going on with my hormones. Could you test my hormones for me? And he was like, yeah, of course. So I did a saliva hormone test. And that's where I saw, oh, I have no progesterone. I had just had my daughter, my first child. And this is when it all happened after I had her. So I had no progesterone. My estrogen was really high. My adrenal hormones were really low. And with that hormonal profile, the thing that you shouldn't be doing is exercising like a madwoman, right? When your cortisol's tanked and you got nothing left in your tank. I was a single mother of a toddler at the time. I had my own business. I didn't think I was stressed because I was just doing what every other woman's doing in North America, but it was stressful. And
Oh
I
my
was
gosh.
burning
I feel
the
like
candle at both ends.
I feel like I'm looking in a mirror, and it's not just because your name is
Right.
also Karen.
Yeah. And so many women can relate with that, where they're like, yeah, I had children and everything changed and I was doing everything right. And yet I still couldn't lose the weight. And, I had severe weight loss resistance and was doing everything wrong. I was going to CrossFit, for heaven's sakes, 6 days a week, and thinking I had to eat less and just move more. And of starving myself, which is both of those things are the worst things that you can do for the adrenal system, for the stress system.
Yeah. And if
shut it down.
If your cortisol is in the toilet, usually that means you're also cortisol resistant. Your cells are also resistant, right? So if it's gone high because of stress and just the stress of being a single mom and a mother, and your cortisol's gone really high because of that, and then eventually it starts to putter out. By the time it starts to putter out, you're probably cortisol resistant. Is that Is that correct?
It's not so much that you become resistant, it's the body's smart and it says, this is not good. Having high cortisol for long periods of time starts to affect the entire system because you're telling your body you're in fight or flight constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it starts to down regulate. So it's not that it starts to sputter out or become deficient in cortisol. It's that your body will stop producing it as much. And so it starts to go down so that you you can still be very receptive to that cortisol, but now you don't have very much. And so now you have no get up and go and you feel burned out and you've got like blood sugar dysregulation from it. And then the other hormones start to suffer with it because they all work synergistically together. And we need progesterone to help make cortisol. And so if you don't have a lot of progesterone, that's also going to be impacting that cortisol and also making you feel like you're really frazzled because progesterone acts on what's called the GABA receptors of our brain, which calm the nervous system. So you've got this like perfect storm happening, which then also starts to affect the thyroid, which then hurts the metabolism, and then you can't lose the weight. And so all of these things were happening to me at one time. And it took me like a decade to figure it all out. But basically, it was a couple of years of me going, okay, clearly I'm way more stressed out than I thought I was. I'm not Superwoman. I quit going to CrossFit. I quit doing the extreme diets and quit calorie counting and doing all those stupid things. I started eating a low inflammatory diet, but it was a paleo-based diet. So it was like whole foods, and I didn't count calories. I ate when I wanted to eat. And it worked. It worked to stabilize my blood sugar. It brought down the inflammation. I started replacing the progesterone. And slowly but surely, then the weight started to come off. And I started just doing yoga. I started asking for help with my daughter. And I started to look at my stress in a completely different way. And I did heal myself and I got a lot better and was able to then maintain that and know, okay, where's my stress levels and am I pushing it too much? And I could adjust. But then 42, 43
and
hit.
then what happened?
Yeah. And then I had my son when I was 38. And so things kind of went once again a little bit haywire after that, where because I already suffered with low progesterone, it really sapped the progesterone again. But it also affected the thyroid a lot when I got pregnant. And this is very common. It's really common for women to develop hypothyroidism after pregnancy. And they probably had an underlying thyroid problem that existed probably their whole lifetime, but it gets exacerbated through pregnancy, and because the baby takes all the nutrients and then your hormones get dysfunctional and then thyroid gets dysfunctional. So my thyroid tanked, and then I was put on thyroid medication, which bound up testosterone. It made sex hormone binding globulin go up, which is a protein that binds to your hormones, primarily testosterone and estrogen. It bound up my hormones and actually started to put me into menopause early. So nobody could have told me this at the time. So, and I didn't know what was going on. It happened really quickly, where in a matter of months, I put on 15 pounds. I suddenly was hot flashing, night sweating. My period started going missing. Had really itchy skin, foggy brain, no libido. And I mean, this is in a 3-month time span. I crashed, and I was like, I thought it was stress. I was like, maybe this is stress. And that probably had something to do with it, but it was this like perfect storm again that happened that all led to this going on. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm going into menopause at 42. And I was like, what is happening?
Time for your double PhD.
Right, exactly. And that's what I did. I actually started to dive then more into perimenopause and menopause and what happens to us and hormone replacement therapy and all the information and the misinformation around on it. And then it just like, I went down every rabbit hole there was to go down. I then became certified as a hormone specialist. I learned everything I possibly could about this stage in a woman's life. And the more I learned, the more I was like, we are not being told the right information or really any information at all about this time. You know, like if a doctor knows a little bit about menopause, great, it's hard to find, but nobody was talking about perimenopause, which is a decade for most women leading up to menopause. And I'm like, what about this time frame where
Yeah.
all the stuff comes down the pipeline, where the weight gain happens and the night sweats and the hot flashes and the dry vaginal tissue, and nobody's talking about this. It's like, oh, once you're in menopause, okay,
Then
we'll
we'll
maybe
address it.
consider look at your hormones and maybe give you some HRT if you need it, but only the smallest amount that is needed to get rid of those little outward symptoms. Nobody was talking about the fact that we age rapidly at this time. So our biological age has been shown that when women hit menopause and they're not on HRT, that they can age on the inside biologically within months of being in menopause, 9 years.
Holy cow.
Within months.
Isn't that crazy? Like it's like, okay, baby making age, and then
Kaboom.
this pause, and it's like, okay, come see me when you're done suffering.
Yes.
I've got something to
exactly.
do for you when you stop suffering. And you've
Yeah.
decided, no, someone's got to
No.
do something about this 5 to 12 year period.
Yes. And educate women about this and say, hey, you don't have to go through this. You know, like suffering is optional during midlife, and women need to hear this. Doctors need to hear this, because what's happening instead is we're being given the choice of, in these early perimenopause years, you're a hysterectomy or an ablation, an antidepressant, a sleeping pill. That is what we're being given. Those are our options.
That
Yes.
often
Or birth control pills.
make
or
it
birth
worse.
control pills. That's a very common to get birth control pills during this time.
All right.
And it's like, what?
So I'd love to hear, first of all, what you did for yourself, what worked for you, because I know that there's probably a lot of nurses kind of on the edge of their seat for themselves. Like, what did you do?
Because I reversed it all.
Who did you go to? What did you do? And then I know you took it to the rest of the world, and this is what you do now. This is your passion. But I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah.
Like, what did you do for you first?
Nobody would help me. So, and I couldn't find the information to help me. Like, just from basic sources, I couldn't get it.
What were those sources that you went to that?
I went to a naturopath. And they were like, well, you could take some progesterone cream. And I was like, yeah, but I'm having hot flashes and night sweats and vaginal dryness and my missing periods. Like that's not just progesterone. The thyroid medication was a problem. I had to find the right thyroid medication. So I had to find the right practitioners to work with. And that I had to go in search of. And so because I was already in this industry, I was lucky that I had connected with a few people from around the world, a guy in England who had his own thyroid journey that had to figure this all out for himself, who helped me figure out my thyroid problems. I had a close friend who was a podcaster herself, who wrote a book called The Paleo Thyroid Solution. And she was my first thyroid coach who really helped me understand what was happening with my thyroid, which nobody here knew information about this. And then the hormone piece, nobody was going to give a 42-year-old woman estrogen because I still had a period coming once in a while. And so I, luckily, because of the industry I'm in, and I was friends with this naturopath, I said to him, this is what I want. After researching, this took a long time. I had to go research and talk to so many people and practitioners and do my own thing. And I said, I want estrogen, and I want to cycle my progesterone, and I want to go on T3 only medication. And he gave it all to me. He let me do my own hormones. And I've been doing them ever since. And so I was able to regulate the cycle back. I soon discovered that the thyroid medication was the large piece of that puzzle. And so being on the right medication and then working at getting that SHBG to come back down, to free up some of these hormones. And so everything started to get back into where it should be. But it took a long time. I got off a lot of the weight on my own. And
Just by working with the switches of your hormones?
Working with this, so giving my body those tools that it needed, because it needs hormones to lose weight. And so replacing the hormones helped. But then I was reading about how we become, we start to lose our muscle tissue in menopause because of the loss of estrogen and testosterone. And I decided, okay, I need to start lifting heavier. I need to start prioritizing protein more. And so I started increasing protein, and I hired somebody to help me with this, because I knew that I had to look outside of my own resources. So I hired a woman who tracked what I ate, got me to eat more protein. Even though I was a nutritionist doing this for other people, I still went and hired somebody.
Totally. Yeah.
And I had to have somebody telling me what to do, and that I wanted to stay accountable to. And she was a personal trainer. So she got me lifting super heavy, and my body slowly but surely started to transform. The weight started coming off, the cycle started to regulate. And I've been on the hormone replacement therapy ever since. I'm still on estrogen. I'm still on thyroid. I did utilize about a year and a half ago, I started using low doses of tirzepatide to get the last little bit of weight off of my body. And that was like a lifesaver. It did amazing things for my body. It actually helped me to reduce my thyroid medication in half.
Can you tell us what's the classification and the mechanism of action of tirzepatide?
Yes, so it's a dual agonist. So semaglutide Ozempic is a single agonist, GLP-1, and tirzepatide is a GIP and a GLP-1. So it acts a little bit differently. We see a lot more side effects with Ozempic, semaglutide, a lot more sickness and digestive issues. And I tried that first, and it was a crash and burn complete. Like I felt like I was on death's door. So tirzepatide worked a lot better. I could take it in really small doses, and I never had to increase. I increased a little bit in the beginning to continue with the weight loss, but I never had to move it past that because I was doing all of the lifestyle pieces with it. So there's a lot of misinformation about these medications that are out there in social media, and a lot of fear mongering. But if they're done appropriately, then they can actually be amazing, especially for midlife women, because the weight that we gain in midlife can be the most stubborn weight to get off. And you could be doing everything right, replacing your hormones, lifting weights, prioritizing protein, and still you can not get all that weight down or off. And it can be really frustrating for women that are doing everything right. And they're like, but I'm putting in all of the efforts. I'm doing everything they're telling me to do. Why isn't the weight coming off? And it's sad, because they are doing everything right. And this can happen to anyone. And I always say, if this can happen to me, a person who was in the hormone business, was counseling women on how to lose the hormonal weight, and I was very successful at what I was doing. I knew what I was talking about. I had a booming business. I had no sugar addiction. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I was the perfect, I thought I was going to sail through menopause. So if all of the things that happened to me could happen to somebody like me, then I want women to know that it's not always what they're doing. That's, like we want to have these foundational pieces for sure, and they're going to help you get through this time. But please understand, ladies, you can have every symptom under, like when you look through the menopausal symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms, you could check off 50 of those symptoms, even though you're the healthiest person, eating right, perfectly, exercising perfectly, it can still happen to you because we can't exercise, we can't supplement, we can't fast, we can't do any of those things out of hormonal loss. Like that's not going to help your body to reboot these hormones. Maybe in your younger years, for sure, it's going to help immensely. But once you start losing ovarian function, you can't supplement your way out of that, and you can't diet your way out. And some of us suffer more than others with the symptoms of this hormonal loss.
Indeed. So for anybody listening to this and about 5 minutes ago was listening to you with all the initials and the XYPDQ99 GLP da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Get to that because I'm going to have you do kind of like a page 1, chapter 1 of what happens. But what first are the things that people do wrong that you encounter? Like they're doing, because you said in the very beginning, it's like the opposite of what I should have been doing.
Yeah. So women will tend to go, oh, I need to go lower carb and I need to work out harder. With the whole movement around intermittent fasting and carnivore and keto, that I see that's where women will go first is let's do these things harder.
Back to what I know to do when I was young and had a full boat of hormones and it worked. Just exercise harder and don't eat carbs. Why does that not work?
Because once again, you can't low carb your way out of hormonal loss. It can maybe help with some things temporarily, right? It can help with blood sugar dysregulation that will happen from the loss of the hormones. And I'm not dissing these things. It's just that when your body starts to go through this hormonal loss, it's stressed. We know from the research, our cortisol goes up in perimenopause for many different reasons. Estrogen goes down. Estrogen actually helps to raise cortisol binding globulin, which helps to bind up some of that cortisol so we don't have too much. So that starts to go down, which means we're going to free up more cortisol, which can start to influence blood sugar, starts to influence fat in the midsection, increase it. So we've got suddenly this little storm happening. I like to call it the hormonal storm that starts to impact each other. So then you're going to go lower carb and fast more and exercise more. So now we're adding to that stress bucket in the body. So now we're raising cortisol more, which then raises blood sugar more, which then can perpetuate all of these problems. We need progesterone to make cortisol. So progesterone starts to drop, then we'll actually start to see cortisol start to go the other way and start to get depleted. And then women get burned out. They have no energy. They're like, oh, I feel like garbage. Low energy is the number one reported symptom of perimenopause and menopause. And so all of this, which all affects the thyroid again. So now we've got this kind of, right? And if you're not eating enough and you're not eating enough carbs, that lowers thyroid function. It actually lowers your ability to convert T4 to T3, and it actually raises reverse T3, the storage hormone, because you're telling your body you're in a famine. So this is all a biological process where it's going, oh, there's not a lot of food around. It doesn't know that you're just fasting because that's what social media is telling you to do, where you're eating 1 to 2 meals a day. So now you're not getting enough protein. So now you're losing muscle tissue, which is your biggest glucose sink. So now you're becoming insulin resistant. You're stressing your system out. Reverse T3 is going up. Free T3 is going down. So your metabolism is going down. So really, you're doing all the wrong things. Now, there's some women that are really metabolically unhealthy, Karen. So in these cases, yeah, going low carb and doing some intermittent fasting, great. It can be a lifesaver and can really shift that metabolic process that's happening on the inside for the positive. But I'm speaking to these women that are health conscious, they are doing things right, they're exercising, they're doing things. We have to start doing things differently in this time frame because everything's shifting on the inside. So you do have to start increasing protein intake because we need to build muscle, which means you got to be eating 3 times a day, a good serving of protein, and a snack that's got like a protein shake or something to get enough protein in. You can't do that if you're eating 2 meals a day and you're intermittent fasting all the time, or 1 meal a day, which is very popular to do. Women think they just, oh, I'm going to do 1 meal a day because it can help me lose weight.
And it's the opposite.
And it's the opposite. So then they're upping their cardio. And it's like, no, actually, we need to drop back on cardio when we're in this time. Once we hit over the age of 40, you want to drop back on cardio and you want to start doing cardio differently. And you want to increase your weights and you want to be heavy lifting, not these 10-pound little dumbbells. It is the most important form of exercise that midlife women need to be doing is lifting heavy weights. It will help to resist that weight gain that happens. It helps with your blood sugar control. It's going to help with your hormones. So if you're replacing your hormones as they're coming down, and that's the other thing that women are doing wrong, is they're being told to, and they believe, okay, I'm going to hold off as long as I possibly can before taking HRT.
Right?
Like it's this like, oh no, I've got to take HRT. Oh, I got to hold off. They see it as this medication and that it's going to increase their risk of breast cancer. I think because of the Women's Health Initiative and because you're getting it from a pharmacy a lot of the time, right? So it's immediately associated with, oh, this is a drug. This is something that the pharmaceutical companies are making. So then it's an automatically bad thing because you're supporting big pharma. I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
I don't want to support big pharma with my hormones.
How about supporting yourself? I love to think of things like when I get overwhelmed and confused about, the initials and the numbers and the cofactors and the the precursors and all the biochemical blah blah. I love to just think about what did nature intend? And when you started talking about the most important exercises that women of middle age, perimenopause, going into menopause can be doing is heavy lifting. And I had this image of a new grandmother, because when, back in the olden days, when your children started having children and we lived in villages where the grandparents, the kids who were the kids who were having kids would be doing most of the work, and the grandparents would be watching the grandchildren and starting the heavy lifting and the squatting and the carrying around heavy weight. I love to kind of go back. What did nature intend?
Do that. Yes.
And it just kind of simplifies everything. Of course, and then we're given, we go and we get thyroid hormone. We're getting sluggish. We're putting on weight. It's like a linear solution when you go to conventional medicine. Oh, we'll test your thyroid, your thyroid's low. So we'll give you some thyroid medication. And all that does is perpetuates the problem. Your body is telling you to slow down and do things differently for a reason. And then, conventional medicine or allopathic medicine just puts a Band-Aid over it. And you were just saying it's the wrong kind of thyroid replacement will bind up what you have, what's naturally supposed to be, and also I got this image of it's like our messengers, like hormones are messengers about what to do, what our body should do with the resources it has. And during perimenopause, the messengers get fired. There aren't as many to go around. And then we increase the need for messengers. You're starving yourself, you're increasing stress, you're increasing cardio, all these things. And now you're trying to do the same amount as you did when in your 20s and 30s with 80% less messengers to tell the body what to do. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm just trying to
Exactly.
kind of frame it in a way. So,
Yeah. But it's always good to go back and go, what
yeah,
am I saying to my body? Like
yeah.
your body doesn't know that it's intermittent fasting. I always tell women, like, how is eating one meal a day, which was really popular for a while, OMAD, right? Oh, I'm eating OMAD and it's just been this lifesaver. I've lost so much weight. How is eating OMAD any different from being an anorexic?
Okay, what's OMAD?
One meal a day.
Oh,
That's the term that was being thrown around like crazy for years. It was the most popular way to eat. Every woman I talked to was eating one meal a day because she was losing weight and she felt so great. And I'm like, by a lot, like, think about that as a hunter gatherer. Just because it's called OMAD doesn't make it so that you're not starving yourself. You are. That is what you're telling your body is there's no food around. So guess what? Not a great time to get pregnant. So let's lower fertility. So many women were losing their periods. Same with on the ketogenic diet. So many women would lose their periods because they're telling their body there's no food around. There's no carbohydrates. We're in wintertime. That's why we have the ability to go into ketosis, was because when there wasn't a lot of food around and it was wintertime, we needed to be able to access our fat stores so we wouldn't die. But long term, it's not healthy for the female hormonal system. And this has been proven over and over again. And it'll slow your thyroid down. It raises sex hormone binding globulin if you have too low of insulin. So now we're binding up our hormones again. But this is all because your body's smart and it's going, oh, well, now's not a time to get pregnant. We have to reduce these fertility hormones somehow. So let's raise sex hormone binding globulin, bind them up.
yeah, let's not.
Right?
Yeah.
Not.
I
We
love
need these hormones.
people like you is like the expression that I came up with. It's like the artistry of common sense. And your medium is hormones. Like you speak hormones, but it's the art. I love what you just did. It's like, yeah, what are you doing?
Right? It's like, hello.
So you
Think
figured
about this, ladies.
you figured this out yourself for yourself. And then you're like, right. And then you started helping other people. When did the whole Karen Martell, like the personality, the podcast, and like how did that come about? You found it, discovered something very profound for yourself when nobody else could figure out with you, and like a dog with a bone, you're like, right, I'm gonna figure this out, and you did.
I did.
And then what happened? How did you get
And
into what you do now?
the more I started talking about it, and I was very hesitant because I'm not a licensed medical professional.
Mm.
And so I had the imposter syndrome. I was like, who am I to talk about? Who's going to take me seriously? So I overcompensated by learning more, by educating myself beyond what these doctors are educating themselves on hormones. Even the hormone doctors that specialize in this, I wanted to be smarter than they are. I want to know more than they do. And I wanted to be able to help the individual woman, because it shouldn't be these like blanket protocols like, oh, here's your pellets when you walk through the door, and here's this much progesterone, and here's this much estrogen. We're only going to do it this way. It's like, no. Hormones, it's this, they do this beautiful dance with each other. There are these chemical messengers sending these messages all over our body. Like nothing else does this in the body. Like they need to be fine-tuned, and every woman is going to need something different. And the more I learned and the more I began talking about this, the bigger my business went. It was just like, it was like everything in the world was telling me, this is where you need to go. And it just pulled me in. And so I just, okay, I'm going to start talking about it more and more and more and more. And I realized maybe this is a good thing that I'm not a licensed medical professional, because I don't think I would have learned as much as I did if I was. And so I had to, like I said, overcompensate for that. And I just realized, wow, women just want to hear this. They want to be educated in this. They want to advocate for themselves. We're in this new era of being self-taught and thirsty for this information, because we're not getting it from the people that we thought we should be getting it from, which is our doctors.
And And in their defense, they're not getting it either. And
They're not. They're
to
not trained.
learn, they're not trained. And in order for them to learn what you know, because I imagine you spent like 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 doing this to figure it out for yourself. Doctors graduate, a lot of them in the insurance based medical model where they have 7 to 10 minutes to talk to their patients. Then they go home exhausted, and their continuing education is what, the medical equipment people or the drug sales people come and introduce new pharmaceuticals, and that's their continuing medical education. I'm not, it's a very blanket statement, so forgive me that, if I'm putting everybody under the same umbrella. I know that there are renegades and pioneers and
Absolutely.
the pathological curious doctors out there who want to help their patients heal. They don't have time. So it's brilliant and beautiful that there are lay people, and I say that in air quotes, like you, who make it their specialty and then go on to teach not only people who are suffering as they are suffering, but also the medical profession and pushing them to evolve and change. And now you have this podcast that's reaching, millions of women and medical professionals.
Yes.
And that's how we heard about you. And it's like
Yeah.
nurses, Wendy and I feel like nurses are the white blood cells. We have the greatest personnel surface area in the medical profession. So if we can teach nurses not only to help themselves, like so many, the nursing population is an aging population. So not only can we take this information in for ourselves, but then we have something to tell to our patients who are suffering, or even a resource such as your podcast and your information, a resource to give them. So it becomes this beautiful kind of grassroots movement. And then patients can kind of, I want to say, gently demand of their medical team, like you did of the naturopath. I'm going to tell you what I need because I have time to do the research for myself. I'm going to tell you what I need. And you are a team member. I'm going to be the quarterback. You're a team member. And let's tweak those switches. So what would you tell a nurse for herself and for her to maybe relay to her patients who are also suffering from the same kind of, middle-aged symptoms? Yeah. What would you tell them to first go do? Who's the first person listening to your podcast? Yes, but they need people like a tangible team member that they can, kind of help them to tweak those switches.
Yeah. And if, because it's nurses listening to this, you guys have an interest in your healthcare. And so you want to learn for yourselves, how can I fix myself? And so it is about going, okay, I feel like I need these things now. And, most physicians, they won't treat you until you're in menopause, but I want everybody listening to this to know that it is in your best interest to start watching these hormones as early as possible in this middle-aged, whether it's your late 30s, early 40s, that's when things start to go. So start paying attention. If you're feeling these symptoms, don't try and diet your way out of it. Like, obviously eat well and do all of the things. Yes. But start testing the hormones. Look at what's going on, and don't just go by blood work either, because blood work can sure look great with these ranges. It's like, oh, if you're between 50 and 1,000, you're good. And so everybody's different. Some people, they'll lose a little bit of estrogen and they get a lot of symptoms. Other people, they lose a little testosterone, they get a lot of symptoms, but can lose a ton of estrogen and not feel it. And so it's like, what is your genetic makeup? And are you suffering? And are you having symptoms? Because then that is your answer to, okay, I need to start watching my hormones and start addressing the hormones now. And then, so know that, okay, progesterone typically goes first. So if you're in your early 40s and you're getting heavier bleeding, you're getting the symptoms of low progesterone, then get some progesterone. And whether that's what, you go to your physician and you demand that. The United States, you guys have the ability to purchase progesterone just online. I actually have my own line of creams that I for that purpose because a lot of women can't get the help from their doctors. So I've decided that's it. I'm going to make my own creams that people can purchase that have the same grade of hormones in it that you would get from a pharmacy. So there's options for you guys, which is really great.
So first on the testing, because if you go to a doctor and just say, test my hormones, you're not going to get the specifics of the different estrogens and the different. So is there a specific panel or something specific to ask for?
Yes. You want to do your general panel, like a CBC panel with differentials. You want to do a lipid panel, the general health panel. Plus, full thyroid panel, you want to do progesterone and estradiol on day 21 of a 28-day cycle or 7 days before the onset of your period. That's very important. We don't produce progesterone in the first half of our cycle, or very, very little. So if you go on day 3 of your cycle, it's going to look like you have no hormones. And so you really want to make sure that you go day 21, and that's when you're supposed to have a bit of a spike in estrogen and then a big spike of progesterone in that time frame, like day 19, 20, or 21. Okay. And so we want to be able to see, are you producing progesterone? Did you get that progesterone spike? You want to test FSH and LH.
I want to put a pin in FSH first. What if they're already in kind of they're having irregular periods? Maybe they missed it for a couple months and it's, asking for somebody else.
Yeah. Yes. And we get this a lot. So if you're having an irregular cycle, you would I always tell women, still track it on a period tracker as though you got the period. So if 28 days goes by and there's no period, put in your cycle that you got, make a note. This should have been my day 1 and starts counting as though you got it.
Okay, that's good.
Because that way, if you are wanting to test, you would still then go to day 21 of what would have been day 21 of that cycle, and you would go test then. Or if you did get a period, you're going to cross your fingers, and you're going to count to day 21 and hope that, okay, I'm going to still go test on this day. And if you don't end up getting a period, it doesn't matter. You still got in that time frame that would have maybe been a day 21. If it's just all over the map, go when you don't have your period, or try and go at least 7 days after your period.
Okay. And I haven't forgotten about the FSH, but if you can order, you can order your own test kits, right? Like if it's day 21, you want something at home for that
as
day.
A nurse, you can.
Yeah. Just want to mention that. Do you know, are there some websites? I mean, I know of some, but
Ulta Labs, Vibrant Wellness. There's several that, as long as you're a licensed practitioner, that you can have access to those.
Okay. Or you can get a doctor to order them so you can have it at home. And it's urine and saliva.
That's just blood work. If you want to do urine or saliva, then you have to go through somebody that's like myself that sells the urine and saliva tests. We do all 3. So we offer all 3 testing. So we can order tests for anybody in the United States for any of those, urine, saliva, or blood work.
Okay. That's a fabulous resource.
Just as an option. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So important.
So our full blood panel is $249 to get all of the right blood work that we need to prescribe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So we can prescribe in every state. We have group coaching options. We've got one-on-one private coaching. And so we kind of have a little of everything for every price point because we want to help as many women as we can. We also have the over-the-counter hormone cream. So if somebody wants to DIY themselves, they can. We've got a great ebook on the site that kind of walks you through, like, if you're experiencing these symptoms, it could mean that you're estrogen deficient, or it could mean you're progesterone deficient. So it's a really nice little guideline, and that's in my shop. You can see it in there under the creams. I can also just give you the link, Karen, if you wanted to put it in the show notes. It's helpful. It's a very helpful little ebook just about, what you're looking out for.
Yeah. And just on your website, KarenMartell.com, just on your website, there's a wealth of information. I still haven't forgotten about FSH. I just had a reunion with my high school girlfriends. Some of us we hadn't seen each other in 30 years. This was just last weekend. And this was just, I can't wait to get off this. And I'm going to send them a link to this podcast and send them to your website because it's like an all-in-one resource. It's fabulous.
Yes, that's what we try and do, is we want to be a one-stop shop for midlife women.
It's wonderful. So day 21, you test for all those things.
Yes.
You also want to look at, please pick it up at FSH.
Yeah, FSH is really important because especially for somebody like yourself, Karen, who's your period's kind of all over the map and you're not sure where you're at, you really want to look at it against the FSH because it can be such a great sign of you're losing your estrogen and you're starting to go into menopause. And this is when you definitely want to start replacing those hormones, because follicular stimulating hormone, it's like it's your brain screaming out to your ovaries, please keep going. And it's going to keep getting higher and higher. The less you ovulate, the less you're producing estrogen. It's just like this teeter-totter. One goes up and one goes down. And so in the research, it actually shows that there's even a correlation between FSH going up and weight gain going up. And that's the magic number there is 23.
Huh.
So they see when women reach over FSH and FSH over 20, they see that that's when the weight gain starts.
Why is that? What is it? What else is FSH
because
stimulating?
It's a sign that you're losing estrogen. So the lower estrogen goes, the higher FSH goes. Estrogen, out of all the hormones, will make you gain the most weight the lower it goes. And so women always associate estrogen with weight gain. And for sure, we have a lot of xenoestrogens in our environment, and we have a lot of deficiency in progesterone. So in that ratio between estrogen and progesterone, we can be estrogen dominant. But very rarely do I actually see women producing too much estradiol. It's mostly that that the progesterone's too low. And so then they're estrogen dominant in that form, or their xenoestrogen load is likely too high. And so they have a lot of exposure to xenoestrogens, which are really strong and will actually sit on your receptors and kick off your actual estrogen.
Block the actual.
Exactly.
Just for glossary of terms for anybody who, I don't know why you wouldn't be familiar with it yet. It's like even in the news so much now, but a xenoestrogen is kind of like what we get from packaging and food and some of the chemicals in food that is like acts like estrogen. The body sees it as estrogen. It binds to our cells as if estrogen does, but it doesn't do what our estrogen does. So it kind of takes up all those parking spaces, and our own estrogen can't do what it needs to do.
Exactly. And so estrogen, too much estrogen, yes, it will make you gain weight, but too little estrogen will make you gain even more weight.
Wow.
And it is the biggest driving factor in the menopausal weight gain, because estradiol is needed for insulin sensitivity, for blood glucose, just to process our blood glucose. It is important, very important, to make muscle. And so without the muscle, we get sarcopenia, then that's our biggest glucose processor as well. So now we're losing, that makes you more, if you're losing your muscle, you're making yourself more insulin resistant without that muscle tissue. And that can be driven by low estrogen. And then estradiol, we have estradiol receptors, estrogen receptors in the hunger centers of our brain. So actually our eating and our hungry, kind of full signals can become dysregulated when we start losing estradiol. So leptin and ghrelin can be affected by that. There's even talk that our GLP, which is a stomach hormone as well, which is what GLP? All these peptides are, GLP, glucose-like peptide.
All right.
No, that's not right. Glucagon like peptide.
Okay. Yeah. XYPD299.
Yep, exactly. Glucagon like peptide, GLP, made in the L cells in the stomach. That can also start to get affected by the loss of these hormones. And so, but estradiol is the biggest driving factor behind the menopause weight, like especially in the weight in the belly. Which happens to most women.
Yeah. Anybody who is like gone cross-eyed with all of the hormones and the different ones, don't worry, there's not going to be a quiz because and there's nothing to get overwhelmed about because your body knows what to do. It just needs the resources that are being depleted in order to do its things. It needs more of the messengers and it needs the right ones in the right spots. And that's why it's important to get your levels tested, to know where you're at, and to have a team member that you can work with that knows all of this complex whatever. But all most women need is to know where they're at and to know what they need and to remember exercise, heavy weights, don't starve yourself, very simple things, and have somebody who speaks the hormone language like Karen Martell does.
Yeah. And don't wait to treat yourself. That's what I say. Like
this
there's
was like
so much like that the supplements can do, and they can help bring back hormones when you're fertile in your younger years, but not when you start to lose ovarian function. So just remember that the only way to get those hormones back, which is your biggest anti-aging tool, is to replace them.
Yeah. And I'm sure everybody listening to you would love if you lived near them and they could take you for a cup of coffee, but they kind of can. RNegade is welcoming Karen Martell and her podcast for nurses can get CE credit. So you can get a CE credit for listening to this interview today, but also we're going to have a bunch of Karen Martell's podcasts in our library so you can take a deeper dive on all of the specifics of the different hormones and the different what to do's, and especially the different teachables that you can give to your patients and resources to give to your patients, which is so important. So we're so happy to welcome you to RNegade, the RNegade library, and to RNegade land for nurses and for their patients and for, for ourselves. So very excited to have you on board. And thanks so much for your time. I really made you go around the houses, but it was a great page 1, chapter 1. This lady ain't faking it. She knows her stuff.
Yeah. Wow. I'll talk about it anytime. So you just come back on if you want. Maybe next time we do a Q&A with your listeners. That's always, I've actually done that several times with nurses, like in nurses groups.
Oh yeah, we're going to definitely do some live stuff because even when you listen to a podcast and people, they have like a lot of nurses are starting, nursepreneurship is becoming an interesting thing where they have, like I was private patient advocacy for a long time. So I would look at what's going on, see if I had known you when you were 43 and that was starting to happen, I would have sought out those people that you found and learned with you. For myself, it's always like I learn as much for myself as I do for my clients, but there's a lot of private patient advocacy things coming out here. And when people have a specific, a client with a very unique imbalance or a unique situation, it's great to have somebody like you as a resource to ask. So we will definitely plan that for the future. Awesome. Thank you so much. Please stay on after I say my fake goodbye so we can pretend we're ending this, and bye. Thanks again, Karen.
Renegades.